Thank you all for joining us. My name is Greg Stegall. I'm the Operations Director for Renewable Energy Alaska Project. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based here in Anchorage, and we have a Juneau office as well. We are a coalition of members and partners, and broadly speaking, we're working to advance clean energy in the state of Alaska. The bulk of our staff is working on STEM education, and that takes place mostly in K through 12 classrooms as well as teacher trainings. And they teach STEM lessons through the lens of clean energy. We also have a policy arm of the organization, creating and advocating for policies that are friendly to our mission. And among other things, the kind of largest policy efforts on our table right now are working to create an electric reliability organization in the state's largest electric grid along the rail belt here. And we are also working to create a statewide green bank, which is a proven financing mechanism which will allow more money to flow to clean energy projects as small as individual home weatherization and up to larger scale commercial renewable energy projects. We also have a bunch of partnerships that we work on. This includes the Sustainable Southeast Partnership, which is a sort of holistic effort to create healthy communities in Southeast Alaska. We have a contract with the Alaska Energy Authority working on wind diesel integration called the Wind Working Group. We have a new program, the Energy Transition Initiative Partnership, and that is in collaboration with the National Renewable Energy Lab, working in remote Alaskan communities. And then lastly, and the subject of today's event, we've got the Alaska Network for Energy, Education, and Employment, and I will let my colleague Chris elaborate on that a little bit more in just a moment. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining. I want to start with just a brief land acknowledgement. I'm working from my home in Anchorage on the traditional and unceded lands of the Dena'ina, and REAP staff live and work throughout the entire state of Alaska, and we recognize the stewardships of these lands for the past thousands of years. I'd like to invite everybody here to use the chat function to let us know where you're coming from. As you're chatting, I think it auto selects just to send to panelists. So be sure to select all panelists and attendees, and just let us know where you're joining us today. And if you don't know the native lands you're on, you can go to native-land.ca and use their little map there, and it'll show you which lands you're on. So yeah, go ahead, drop in the chat where you're coming from. And while you're doing that, I'll just take care of a couple housekeeping items. We've got a great program lined up today. So I want to jump into that. And I just want to kind of give a rundown on a couple of the webinar features here. We are going to be saving a good chunk of time at the end for audience questions and answers. And I would like to encourage everybody to ask questions during the event as they pop up. We'll try to snag a few, especially if they're relevant. We'll answer them right there. And then we'll save the rest for the end. But we will be using the Q&A feature. So at the bottom of your screen, there's a little Q&A button. So please use that to submit your questions. I mentioned the chat. Definitely continue to use the chat if you want to share resources or links or any other information. But questions often get a little bit lost in the chat. So please use the Q&A feature. That'll help us keep track of everything. And lastly, we are recording this webinar and we'll be posting it on our YouTube page. I'll be sure to send out a follow-up email after the event, probably tomorrow, with a link to that recording. So please go ahead and share that with anybody else who you think might be interested in hearing from us. So I think that's about all I have. I will turn it over now to my colleague, Chris McConnell. Chris is the director of the Alaska Network for Energy, Education, and Employment. And he's been working with us since 2017 working to maximize energy literacy and training opportunities at the K through 12 level, the vocational training level, the university level, and connecting those dots to make it easier to identify pathways for clean energy careers. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Greg, and thank you everybody who has joined us today. I'm also speaking to you from Denina Lands in our Anchorage office downtown. Good to slowly see some normalcy in our workday lives. Greg gave you a good description of what Annie is. I say when I talk to people that essentially I'm looking at the state of Alaska, and anywhere students or mid-career folks or people looking towards careers or in university or graduating from university, anywhere they're getting energy literacy education or increasing their energy literacy capacity and opportunities for training in the state that lead to, in some cases, jobs, in some cases, careers, and trying to map that and connect the different, sometimes siloed entities in our very large state. Today, I'm focusing on that question I get when folks say, oh, what do you do? And there's so much talk about the clean energy transition, in some cases revolution, especially with this large infrastructure package that seems to be on the horizon. What does that actually mean for a clean energy job? Where are those jobs, and specifically, where are they in Alaska? And so I want to just give some statistics and some landscape that apply to Alaska and nationally, and then try to jump right into our panelists. But I want to start with definition. So REAP does a very clean and simple definition of clean energy, and that is renewable energy and energy efficiency. You can go to the broader one that I think has been around for a while, and that's a green job. And that's one where employers pursue environmentally sustainable practices. And that can get sort of mushy. It's good, but there's green, I think the Workforce Investment Board for Alaska identified 77 different green career pathways, everything from welding to truck driving to a Bachelor of Arts degree in renewable energy resources. So that's so broad that sometimes not as useful. The one that I think is maybe best for our purposes is one that comes out of the Brookings Institute and the Pew Charitable Trust, and it describes the clean energy sector. So I'll just read that. And that is, the clean energy economy generates jobs, businesses, and investments while expanding clean energy production, increasing energy efficiency, reducing greenhouse emissions, waste and pollution, and conserving water and other natural resources. And so that covers a lot of territory, but is fairly specific. So let's just run through some renewable energy numbers in Alaska, just focusing on renewable energy power generation. Right now, the United States generates 17% approximately of its electricity needs through renewable energy. And in Alaska, that number is 30%, with 90% of that coming from hydropower. So that's promising and good news, but like all things in Alaska, that scales differently. How does that translate to the renewable energy workforce? A little less than 700 jobs, according to the last labor report. So that's 0.2% of the 330,000 plus workers in Alaska working in renewable energy. If you want to look at categories, you often hear nationally, wind and solar is a huge growth opportunity, and that's true. But the number working today are 98 solar workers in Alaska, approximately 37 wind technicians, and 469 hydropower workers. So again, the numbers get sort of small. And if you talk to a wind tech in Alaska, that 37 number is really high because it depends on how you define a wind tech. If you're cutting grass at the base of a tower, that is a wind tech. So moving into the sort of world of consulting in the renewable energy world, there's 100 different private businesses that in Alaska that deal with renewable energy systems. So where are the bulk of the jobs? Let's move to that definition, and it really comes down to efficiency. And I'll give you some more national numbers. Where there is a steady increase is the construction industry, where 50% of a worker's time is being used for energy efficiency measures. That number keeps creeping up. So in Alaska, what does that translate to? 4,421 workers spend half their day working on energy efficiency issues. And I'm just going to keep moving into where the jobs are, because they are really in the trades, in the construction. And the lesson here is it's the same folks and the same jobs that built our state fairly recently are the same jobs that are going through this transition. So it's not the title of the job so much that's changing, it's the work those workers are doing. And so there's 11,900 workers working to maintain heat in some of the oldest, or I shouldn't say oldest, the least efficient building stock in the country. There's about 15,000 workers working on HVAC systems and building monitoring systems and building science that are making those buildings work more efficiently. There are 1,500 workers in the power generation, 460 power plant operators, 366 linemen, 47 dispatchers through rural and rail belt Alaska, keeping the lights on. I think really important and sometimes to overlook are the number of politicians, school principals, borough managers, city managers, village council folks, that more and more what they are doing is looking at energy efficiency issues that improve the quality of life and save money for their communities. So that's where the large answer, I think, the jobs are. And so having set that landscape, what I'd like to do is, for the purposes of time, I'm gonna, as quickly as I can, give a thumbnail introduction to each of our panelists, and ask them a question immediately afterwards. And so I'm just going to go left to right on my screen. Susanna Mishler is a wire woman with IBEW 1547. She also is the construction electricity teacher at King Tech High School here in Anchorage. She was recently named the 2020 New Career Technical Teacher, Career Technical Education Teacher of the Year. She is also a published poet from some of the leading poetry publications in the country. She was formerly an educator with the Imaginarium at the museum in town here, and has had a really interesting career trajectory to become a wireman. And so I'm going to tee you up, Susanna. Can you describe your personal workforce / career trajectory? How did you end up where you are right now?
I guess the short answer to that would be it was a crooked road. I got a degree in environmental studies from the Evergreen State College. I did a lot of natural history and ecology for that degree. And then I went into kind of environmental and hands-on science education. Meantime, I took a break from that and then got my poetry degree, and always coming back to Alaska. And then I decided to make a career change. I had a friend who had joined IBEW in Portland, Oregon, as a wireman apprentice. And the reasons that she joined got me thinking. And when it came time for me to start thinking about what was next for me, I put in with local 1547 and got offered an apprenticeship, and I took it. And that was, when was that? That was 2006, 2007. And I've been working in the electrical industry ever since, as an apprentice, so a journeyman wireman, and now as a teacher with the Anchorage School District, teaching my trade.
Thank you, Susanna, and we'll return back to touch on some of those. And I think what you'll find is a through line through a lot of the folks here are energy educators / energy communicators, because I think energy literacy is an easy thing to wrap our heads around and say, but the actual work is what pushes the ball forward. And I think a lot of these folks experience that firsthand. I'm going to go next to David Persinger. David is the current operations and maintenance division director for the Anchorage Wastewater Utility here in town. And as a guy who personally, I have a degree in philosophy. So whenever I write my resume, it's an act of creative writing as well to try to find my trajectory. But David has one of those resumes that's awesome, I think. His first job out of UAA after he got his engineering degree was with Anchorage Wastewater as a civil engineer. And you can map his hopscotch up the totem pole from a division director till now operations manager. And so I think that you, if I'm not mistaken, are also homegrown talent, which we like to see, David, unless I got that part wrong. But I wonder, I'm going to pose the same question to you. Tell us a little bit about your trajectory and maybe through an energy lens there at AWD, at Anchorage Wastewater.
Thank you. Yes. As you said, I started out actually started as an intern at the Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility in the engineering division prior to completing my degree at UAA in 2007. I worked in project management for quite a while in our engineering division, and then I moved over to the treatment division director, which oversees the 5 treatment plants that we have in our water distribution system, environmental compliance, things like that. And then about 2 years ago, I moved over to operations and maintenance, which is kind of the other side, the support side of the organization. And we have, under my workforce, we have everything from electricians, supervisory control and data acquisition technicians, HVAC folks, fleet mechanics, and then a whole collection and distribution group that does most of the underground work on the utilities as far as repairing water line breaks, working on the sanitary sewer system, making sure that the water gets to the customers and the wastewater flows to where it needs to be. As far as from the energy lens, I've kind of been engaged in that for pretty much my entire career. Most of the projects we do and is always trying to reduce our energy footprint because we're a fairly large organization. We have a lot of facilities, and energy is a huge part of what it takes to operate the utility. So we're always looking from things like LED lights, ways that we can reduce our footprint. And back in the mid 80s, when they built the Eklutna water treatment plant, they actually put in a hydraulic turbine that captures energy from the water that comes from Eklutna Lake, and that actually powers the entire facility as well as puts power back onto the power grid. And similarly, right now we're in the process of doing a project here in Anchorage proper where we have a pressure regulating system. We have a lot of pressure zones because of the topography and the dynamics of the way our system works, and so we have to separate pressure zones and generally reduce pressure. And we've for a long time have worked to try to utilize as much of that energy coming from our treatment plant, and we push water all the way out to 135th Avenue in South Anchorage via gravity. And so now as part of our clean energy, looking at reducing our footprint is we're installing a pilot system, and we'll probably do some more of these, where it's an inline turbine that captures that energy when we go from a higher pressure zone to a lower pressure zone. And the project we're currently working on is going to power our warm storage facility, which is a very large industrial vehicle storage where we keep all of our heavy equipment. and that'll pretty much take care of the demand for that. So, a bit of a windy path to the energy side, but very pertinent, and from both a sustainability as well as reducing a footprint. Energy it's becoming everybody's business, even individuals in their homes and everywhere. It's there's a lot of emphasis on it, and I think it's a good thing.
Thank you, David. And I think that's, you just scratch any of these occupations, and energy efficiency is really right there. I'm gonna jump into Griffin Hagle. And Griffin, I'm gonna take a shot at the Inuit pronunciation of Taġiuġmiullu, Nunamiullu. And that's why a lot of people say the TNHA that is the housing authority. So Griffin is the director of the housing authority there, and he's had a really interesting career path from written for several publications, Fast Company, High Times, about these sort of efficiency issues, clean energy, an energy communicator in a sense, and then worked through it is Solar City, did some energy auditing, found himself in the North Slope, working up there on housing issues, where obviously cold climate science comes in to his current position. And Griffin, I'm gonna maybe jump in right away with you, and just tell me sort of some of the energy issues, challenges, or what lens you're looking through your current job at TNHA through.
Thanks, Chris. And just before I get into that was a pretty good attempt for someone in South Central Alaska. Taġiuġmiullu Housing Authority means in the Inupiaq language that we serve the coastal and inland peoples of the Arctic slope, and I'm fortunate to work on Inupiaq lands here. So yeah, we have about 350 units of affordable and market rate public rental housing under our management across a borough and a service area roughly the size of Minnesota. So it's a challenge, but we produce all the housing that we develop. We develop it to the Alaska BEES, building energy efficiency standards. There's jobs in maintenance, in construction, obviously, but in managing and maintaining these in an efficient manner. That are very important for us and kind of key to what we do here. And so like David said, every energy is everybody's business. It's certainly our business. Energy on the North Slope of Alaska is probably some of the highest per kilowatt hour prices when you start looking at the total levelized cost of anywhere in the United States. I think we're probably on par with diesel generation costs in Hawaii. So that's critical for us. And did I address the question you'd asked?
I think you did, and I'll circle back with some more specifics, but thank you, Griffin. And we have Laura Klement here as well. Laura is our only panelist that is not in Alaska right now. She's based out of the Dalles, which is a little bit outside of Portland. And I wanted to include Laura because I really think from my perch, I see I should talk about her background as well. An energy educator, an energy auditor. She also runs some classes that encourage women to get their hands on power tools and construction skill sets, and is doing a lot of work with builders, architects to try to get on the front end of introducing them to energy efficient technologies that they should be aware of utilizing. And I think Laura's job is interesting because there's no clean title for it. She's, I think, self-described hustler. She's got a lot of it, but almost everything she's doing does have to do with energy efficiency, and she's self-employed. And so there's a real entrepreneurial aspect of Laura's work. Laura, tell me if I did that okay, or if you could sort of elaborate on your trajectory.
Yeah, that's great. I know, I feel like I'm kind of a ninja of sorts or something. I grew up in Minnesota, and I got a degree in architecture. So I was interested in green building and that type of work. And then I moved out to Portland, and because I realized architects didn't know how to build houses or how houses were put together. So I went and worked on a construction crew and learned about that. And it was less about the green building side of things than just like the nuts and bolts of, or should I say the wood and the nails of putting things together. And then that sort of drew curiosity. That experience with new construction. I got curious with existing homes and how to help improve them. And so I worked for another nonprofit in Portland doing basic weatherization work, like storm window kits and door weather stripping and things like that, to help them, low income and seniors in the community. And then from there, I got into doing energy audits on the for-profit side of things. And then I got interested in renewable energy. So I did solar. I was able to get a job as a solar installer because of my carpentry background. And I had a referral from a former employer. So I was up on roofs, and I enjoyed that work, and ended up moved sort of pursuing the path of becoming an electrician. And that ended up being not the right fit for me. So I started my business almost 4 years ago now. So yeah, I kind of do a little bit of everything now that I'm in the gorge, because there's kind of like nobody else out here is doing that type of work. There's not like a huge demand. Like I'm working with about 20 homes a year in Hood River. And I do blower door testing for code compliance, and I do these workshops for women, which is honestly one of my favorite things that I do, is empowering others. And so I have a vision to build a cottage community as part of a workforce development program to get youth involved with green building and building science. So I also teach I teach some of those classes too for nonprofit in Portland. So piecing it together, and having a lot of fun. And I'm building a house right now too. That's it's been off grid, but I think I'm gonna grid tie it for multiple reasons here soon. But yeah, it's been 2 years of camping. So I'm in my office. This is my vehicle right now, charging my phone.
Thank you, Laura. And I'm gonna pair you with Susanna in a moment in terms of some maybe educator questions, but I want to do the same thing for Griffin and David, as you're both sort of in a position of hiring folks. I wonder, what is the most in-demand skill set in your particular sectors? And I'll start with you, Griffin.
Well, Chris, like I was telling you yesterday, we could probably, and this is before the Rescue Plan Act passed and all that came down, could easily use 1 or 2 more electricians, 1 or 2 more plumbers, and probably 3 to 5 more carpenters for just the project load that we have. And now with the relief funds and some other things that have come out in the wash for us, we're going to be building new homes in all of our villages starting in 2022. So, carpentry, electrical trades, plumbing trades, mechanical, and all of those, we, like I said, we build to standards. We're really looking at, with this next round, I had a conversation with the folks at the Cold Climbing Housing Research Center the other day. How can we get to a net zero ready standard for a place like the Arctic Slope? So kind of conventional jobs that everybody knows, but just viewed through a little bit of a different lens with a bit of a different focus. And yeah, we're hiring soon. I've got to get a position posted for a development director and, environmental and permitting people as well. But these jobs, it's not just here, it's nationwide. There's a huge shortage in the skilled trades. It shows up in the data for the last 30 years that high school students have been taking less CTE credits. I think part of it, in my generation is we were always kind of told, work smart, don't work hard. And that kind of got interpreted as this kind of stigma around vocational education and like the blue collar building trades. But we have a great need and have a great need to stimulate youth interest and interest from, from minorities and women in these trades, and really just make it a holistic endeavor where everybody sees that these are jobs with meaning, with purpose, that are part of something bigger, that provide a vital service to the community. So it's going to be a big lift, but yeah, there's definite need there.
And that's a good place for me. I want to throw this statistic out there too, that 20% of non-resident Alaska workers make up the construction sector in our state, and 30% of the oil and gas workers are out of state. And so considering the fiscal state of our economy, that's something to really direct towards. And pre-COVID, we were last, or usually close to last, in highest unemployment. COVID's altered that a little bit. We're sort of 35th. So we have this conundrum where we have a lot of great jobs available. Some of them are being exported out of state, and it falls into that skills gap category. So there are jobs, we just don't have the Alaskans ready to fill those jobs. And so Susanna, I'm gonna put that in your lap as a CTE instructor. And I think echoing what Griffin said, I think in the 90s, there was a big effort to scale back CTE programs. And now at least I'm sensing a real pushback the other way, that there's this utility and these are good jobs. There are defined career pathways and careers. What do you see right now amongst your students, and what do they do once they leave your classroom? Are they finding work? Are you able to tell?
Are they finding work? There are some students who excel. This is my third year teaching at King Tech, and my third year teaching electrical. There are some students who excel that I know what their next step is. I get students also who are, as juniors and seniors in high school, they're still figuring out what they're interested in. So they may hop from my class over to carpentry or over to the automotive program, and where they ultimately land is, I don't know that we have an excellent tracking system for all of our CTE students. King Tech is its own high school now. We give out our diplomas that say King Tech on them. That was for decades not the case. We were a career center, and so it's kind of one facility with ramped up, shop facilities and equipment. Though and then I think that was kind of prompted a reduction in shop programs at some of the major high schools. There are shop programs in some of the major high schools. We call them the Big Eight. But they are not perhaps as robust because King Tech is here. However, there's a little bit of a speed bump, for students. They take half of their day, our students, and come from as far as Chugiak on a bus to take a career trades class at King Tech, and then ride the bus back to their home school. So, so that can be a deterrent to taking a CTE class, even one like mine, which is unique in the district. And if you're going to take construction electricity, you have to make it to King Tech. So that's where career trades in construction is.
Right. And I think there's maybe a nice segue in the sense that the trades are trying to see what's going on in these CTE. That's a good place for recruitment. It's that opportunity to get your hands on something, to find out you like it. I think, as Griffin had pointed out, a lot of people, there was that sort of bias. Oh, you're an auto shop. You're sort of, there's a class mentality of where you are, where you don't reach that population that says, hey, I love this and I'm passionate about it. Instead of identifying, oh, this is a skills gap, push someone in there who does or doesn't care. It's finding the folks that could be passionate about it. And so I'm going to move over to you, David, and say, as we look at the utilities, both water and electric, we hear the graying of that workforce, that there is this next generation that is not ready to fill those roles. So there are a lot of jobs available. Tell me a little bit about the challenges or strategies or what you're seeing when you're looking to find people to move into the wastewater space.
Yeah, by and large, our biggest challenges as far as workforce positions to fill are supervisory control and data acquisition technicians. Those are, it's a quasi computer programming automation, and there's a lot of competition for that skill set, and we have challenges filling that. The other area that we have fairly significant challenges in is finding good mechanical folks that can, like machinists, and a lot of the stuff we have is older equipment. It's got to, there's parts aren't available. They have to be able to manufacture them, and those skill sets are really not readily available. Some of the successes we've had is working with the Alaska Job Corps program. We've hired a lot of folks out of that as entry-level operators. And they work up through the system. We can provide the training. We need somebody that has, the mechanical abilities, the ability to think through processes, and, have a high level of integrity, because the work we do, it impacts, 250,000 people at any given point of the day, at any, given day of the week. So those skill sets are important. And I was looking at the questions. One of the questions was asking how to get women and girls into the clean energy jobs. We have a pretty diverse workforce here, and I'll highlight one individual that we hired and that had actually interned with us during the Job Corps program. It's a young lady from Lake Clark area, and she's now a senior operator in our distribution operations group, and actually trains all of our entry-level operators on harnessing, pressure regulating valves, and how our distribution system works. So there's tremendous opportunity for everybody from all different backgrounds, if they're willing to put the time in. And it's a great career. A lot of these jobs are they're pushing up close to $100,000 a year, so they're very it's a good career. And there's a lot of different opportunities. They gain a skill set or the licensure, and then can move over to a different area and explore more of that.
And I think that's a good on-ramp to maybe talk to Laura, because I think that a lot of these jobs are pigeonholed as, oh, that's a certain kind of job, when in fact this energy transition is making them more and more interesting, intellectually challenging, technically challenging, and sort of getting that front and center to this generation of workers is important. And Laura and I had a brief discussion a few days ago, where part of her work is going and talking to a builder, educating that education piece, but it sounded like you're sort of meeting some resistance between adaptation of some of these technologies and designs versus that's cool, but am I going to deploy it? So I guess as a worker in the front lines, what are you seeing there? What are the challenges in sort of educating builders, designers? Laura,
I forgot to unmute myself. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I was just responding to the question, so I was like kind of half listening to what you just asked me, but the resistance sometimes, I guess some of it's like being, a young woman, and I'm often working with men who are, close to retirement age, and so it's like, okay, there's, they've been doing something, I've always done it this way, and for 30, 40 years, and like, I don't want to change. But honestly, like, I don't know, I feel less of that than sort of like, there's interest in learning new things. I think a lot of it comes down to cost. Like, a lot of builders want to do some of these other things, but they, with where I live, everything's like in the gorge. I mean, a lot of areas are expensive, but it's getting pretty like unaffordable for just the working class people to live here. And so like builders who are essentially trying to build workforce housing, and they're already kind of at the max of what their clients can budget for and get mortgages for. And so like, well, we'd like to put solar on the roof of all the houses. Like, we'd like to do that, but like, we can't, it's just not in the budget. So I help them kind of work on the sort of the less sexy things, like, improving the insulation and making sure, I mean, really it's more about the install, and making sure that's done correctly, and making choices. And I had a builder the other day was like, well, I have a client, they don't really care about the energy efficiency pieces, but they care about durability and like health and like indoor air quality. And I was like, well, that's, I don't find myself always talking about the energy piece. It's like, it's just talking about the other things that people care about. And especially with now we have our new building code this year includes balanced ventilation systems in homes, so that you're pulling in fresh air from the outside and exhausting the stale air from the inside, which was not a requirement, but now it is. And it's great, but it's like a new thing that everyone has to learn. And we have to all have all of our ductwork inside as part of the new code as well, like inside the conditioned space. So we can't be running stuff through attics and crawl spaces anymore. So those are two big, really awesome improvements from like in healthier indoor air quality. And I think with COVID and the fires and people spending more time at home, I think that's, kind of an easier sell for them to understand finally, of like, because we've been talking about that kind of thing for some of them. I've been talking to them about it for years. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Part of the hustle. I'm going to return to Griffin real quick. I want to make sure we have time to field a lot of questions from folks, but Griffin, we often hear about, as we call the rail belt from Homer up through Fairbanks, and the rural rail belt divide. And I wonder, one of the biggest inefficiencies in rural Alaska is that so many of the skilled tradesmen have to fly in from the rail belt to service it. So there's often talk of sort of a regional or hub skilled worker set. And I know, Griffin, that would serve your region really well. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit, for example, of lessons learned, and you helped establish something called BERT, the Building Energy Retrofit Technician, which was an apprenticeship towards, really skilled weatherization. But that, not to dwell on just that, but the idea of what can, in your view, the next step towards sort of building up a regional skilled workforce? What does that look like for you?
Well, that's a big question with many facets. Thanks for that, Chris. And just to give credit where it's due for the BERT program, that came from Markham, George at the University of Southeast Alaska. And we had just adapted it into kind of a 1-year weatherization apprenticeship certificate. And we had a great candidate go through that program who really thrived, a local candidate here at Iqaluit. Before that program ended and I transitioned to my new job. But doing weatherization work and just traveling to all the 8 villages in our region, what happens is you go to a village, you get off the plane, especially if you spend a week or more there, you kind of meet people. You almost meet everybody, and that there's some folks in each village, who've got some skill sets that, just village life. The reality is there's not a Home Depot, to drive down the road to and get stuff. So you figure things out. Everybody's got a little bit of these things. And then there's some, honest to goodness, really skilled tradespeople out there that may not have, the state fitness card that says, on paper, they're a journeyman or whatever. So that's one of those challenges, is connecting those people to the opportunities and structuring it in such a way that an entity like us, that has federal housing dollars and standards for employment and so on and so forth, can meet these people somewhere and bring them into the employment mix, and grow them into these careers. So, one conversation we're having that's definitely been informed by that last apprenticeship a few years ago is with Ilisagvik College, our tribal college up here, which is currently the only tribal college in Alaska. And we're very fortunate to have them understand, like they really get it, that there is this skilled trades shortage and gap, and that these are opportunities that are going unmet, that the local people could meet. And so we are going to be starting, with this effort to create a kind of a model on the National Skilled Trades Signing Day after the high school graduation this year, saying, hey, TNHA is going to be building new homes starting in 2022. This is going to be, probably a 3-year effort, just from construction season to construction season. And that's the perfect time frame to journey out some new apprentices, or to get them along the way to a really rewarding career in the trades. And when I say rewarding, I mean you're providing something for the community that's valuable. But I mean, these are 6-figure jobs up here too for journeymen. I mean, these are very financially rewarding jobs as well. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head. A lot of the labor, the realities of it, it's not just us. It's the municipalities, it's the nonprofit associations, it's the utilities in rural Alaska. A lot of that workforce has to be imported. And it's not going to change overnight, but I think communicating the prestige of these jobs, just how important, how relevant, how much utility they provide, that's where it's got to start. And so I think somebody said it earlier, it might have been you, that there is sort of this pushback to the college readiness drive that sort of took over and displaced a lot of the CTE focus from the 90s onward. And we're starting to see that, and that's really encouraging. So I'd hope to be able to tell you in 2025 that we've got, a dozen new trade journey people up here that helped us build houses. So we'll see where that goes.
Thanks. And I think that there's a recruitment piece there that again goes out to the energy literacy there. I know like Natural Resources Extraction does a pretty good job. I think the Delta Winds Trade Center does a good job in that they find if you can get the recruitment, get 1 or 2 really good employees, and they go back to their home village, rural community, and that person handpicks another candidate, and that sort of model sort of begets itself. And so it's a challenge because in a sector I work in quite a bit, the powerhouses, a diesel mechanic would be a huge value add, just even out of a hub community, but that's a sort of 7-year apprenticeship and journeyman. And, as we all know, then you're facing some choices. Maybe I should live in the lower 48 or somewhere else and make $150,000. Although I do think that candidate does exist that does want to live in their community and sort of build up their business. And that's sort of I think a 10-year arc, but finding the right people to get their boots on the ground, I think is crucial. I know we're getting close on time here. Greg, can you help? Am I missing anything? Are there any questions or raised hands that someone might want answered?
Yeah, to see one question sitting in our Q&A box. So yeah, everyone, please go ahead and ask some questions. We got, about 12 minutes left. So plenty of time to answer some more questions. The one I see here, and then maybe I'll just turn it back over to you, to Chris, to keep picking away. A question about jobs where foreign languages or legislative advocacy are needed.
All right. Well, we'll stew over that one for a moment. I'm going to kick this one to you, Laura, as our sort of sole entrepreneur on the panel here. How much of your day is actually sort of going over accounting, QuickBooks, not the actual energy work? And is that a challenge? Because again, in my survey of reading white papers and doing a gap analysis, you have a basket of skill sets that I think is really translatable, but you're hanging your own shingle there. And I'm wondering if you could speak to the challenges of that juggle?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, for now, I do everything myself. Like I do all my social media, I do my taxes, I do all the things. And generally, and invoice, yeah. And so kind of I do like a once a month. I mean, I kind of do things in between there, but I do a once a month sort of like a recap and like, you know, tracking of like, you know, where, you know, how much money I brought in, what I spent, and put that together in a document. And so far I haven't needed to hire anybody else, and I think that's just part of me being able to pick the jobs that I want to do and the work that I want to do and when I want to do it, and having time for that. And also because ever since I started building the house, I've given myself a lot more time and space around that, because I'm running a business and building a house and then mixing in playtime and all of that. So I think I just leave myself a lot of time and flexibility to take care of the things I need to take care of.
Thank you.
So, and there's great, do you have small business development centers up there?
We do, and some incubators.
Because that's been helpful too. Like I'm part of a Gorge Women in Business group, and then the small business development centers. They have a lot of great resources because there's a lot of solo entrepreneurs here. So, yeah.
Thank you, Laura. Here's a through, and I think Greg put a section of a careers gap analysis that came out of my department, where I got a lot of the stats that you heard this morning. But Susanna, there's a far-reaching need for train the trainers in our state. And so if we move into the training sector here, you as a member of the IBEW, are there some sort of maybe unorthodox solutions there, retired IBEW folks? Is there a way of building up this network of when we say the graying of the utilities as the baby boomers age out and are retiring, their skills are still can be valued? And I know there's discussions of trying to sort of flood the market with more train the trainers that might not have full-time jobs anymore. Does that ring true to you?
Yeah, as I am listening to the current presidential administration's push for infrastructure development, and I look around and Griffin's point, well made, that we have a shortage of skilled tradespeople nationally. I think to myself, well, it's really going to put a finer point on both that shortage and also a shortage of people to teach those people. So, and it's, teaching is a separate skill from the skill being taught. So, not every great poet wants to teach poetry. And not every electrician wants to teach their trade. But developing that skill from the beginning is also, and making it a part of our training to become electricians, for instance. I started doing that in my shop in partnership with our local training center. High-time apprentices come in and, as part of their education, help teach skills to high school students so that they get a taste of what it's like on the job to teach their apprentices that they're soon to have as journeymen. So developing, teaching as a skill is desirable, but also finding those people who would like, in retirement, or who know their trade, and giving them an incentive to transition over to doing some teaching. That's definitely a challenge that we're going to be facing. There are not a whole lot of other people in Alaska who teach electrical.
Yeah, it's try looking for an electrician in Bethel, I hear, it's not easy. And that's another example of there's a job that exists there, but the skill that doesn't. I'm going to throw this one out to David, Griffin, and certainly anybody else who might have it. It looks like it's coming from, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Ben Bettinger. What job skills presently used in the Alaskan oil and gas industry can be transferred to the emerging renewable energy industry? Is there any data about how many Alaska oil and gas workers, contractors could be employed in renewables? Is there data comparing average wages for similar jobs in those two sectors? David, any thoughts there?
I can't speak to, the data. I'm sure there's probably something out there. I imagine the state of Alaska probably has information on that. I would say the majority of them do, because most of these, if you break these systems down into their smallest components, they're no different than, anything else. They're, turbines or pumps that are being driven rather than, driving something, electrical systems, if you're doing solar, wind power, that it's the same principles as, a diesel generator or natural gas generation. If you break it down to the lowest, the components and the skills needed to service those components, there really isn't a whole lot of difference between, conventional or traditional skill sets in these areas and the, emerging renewable or green energy sector. So I don't really see there being a difference. And I see that a lot of those skill sets transfer over. In fact, at our utility, we have a lot of folks that have, worked on the North Slope and decided they wanted to live in town. And so they've come to work for us, and those skill sets are very applicable.
Griffin, are you seeing some sort of oil and gas homegrown talent that decides to transition away, or not quite yet?
I would say not quite yet, but it's a really interesting question. And to David's point, all the mechanics and the engineering are the same. It's really just what is the focus of the task. And I think, the plumbing skill set is the plumbing skill set, no matter what task you're doing, for example. But there's, historically, Alaska's obviously an oil and energy production state. There's a lot of focus and conversation centered around maximizing or optimizing production, right? Refilling the pipeline, so to speak. I think historically, there hasn't been as much emphasis on decreasing the demand, or the demand side of that. So I think it's probably a simpler matter than a lot of people think. And I don't have the data at hand. I would love to see that data. I don't think they're all going to be the same jobs, and I don't want to oversell the simplicity of that transition. But I think once the decision is made, once enough people commit to that focus on energy efficiency and generation from cleaner sources, I think the barriers are less imposing than a lot of people think.
Yeah, thank you, Griffin. And we're closing in on time here. Mark Masteller has directs a program, and he's made a good comment in the chat there. He directs the University of Alaska Fairbanks Sustainable Energy Program, and I think that's a great note to close on, because they have really a fantastic curriculum, everything from home energy to upper blower doors. And the question when I tell people about that program, what does that certificate get me? Does that am I immediately hired because of that job? And I think that you still hear me? Is that certificate is for principals, it's for borough managers. It is that is where the transition is happening. And looking at these panelists across the board, these are not the glamour jobs, sorry guys, that people sometimes think of when they think of renewable. It's not the Elon Musk position, but I think in the space age transition, how the astronauts were the glamour, it really fired these technological transitions and created a whole slew of people interested in really changing the world, and that's those incremental job changes, I think, is what we're looking at. I'd like to thank all my panelists and feel free to reach out to REAP to contact any of those folks or reach out to them directly. And any more workforce development stuff, please visit the REAP website and reach out to the Annie program. And just like to close to thanks for all of everybody attending and everybody participating.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you, yeah, all the panelists. Really appreciate your time and everybody who attended. Yeah, as I mentioned, we'll be posting this on YouTube, and I'll send out a link. There's also a handful of kind of resources that have popped up on the chat, so I'll be sure to link to those in the follow-up email as well, including some of the numbers that Chris mentioned at the beginning. I know there were some questions about getting those details. So yeah, really appreciate everybody's time. Please join us on our next and final speaker series event that is coming up on April 21st, where we will be looking at some federal energy legislation that's been coming out recently and kind of diving into a little bit of those details and how it might affect Alaska. So yeah, once again, thank you to the panelists. Thanks, Chris, for directing a great conversation.
Thank you, everybody.